I remember when I made this video, I think 2 weeks ago, about Andrew winning FIbo, beating South. And Soldier Oliver, everybody was saying that. Even my friend at the gym was arguing with me that South should have won. This is that. Yeah, it's true. South was more conditioned. South won prejudging. South won prejudging hands down. There was no disputes in that. But I also told you guys that Andrew was off in prejudging. He came back way better. That is why he won. Because in prejudging, all the judges gave it to Saz, just based on his condition. But don't forget, only condition is not enough for you to win a show, right? So Andrew came back way better, way tighter. His poses improved. That is why he won. And I said this to you guys. And a lot of people was arguing with me in the comment section below, which is fun. I like that. I like us going back and forth because that is all purpose of, doing this video and for bodybuilding. So I really appreciate you guys that subscribe to my channel. And I appreciate you guys that haven't subscribed. Please turn on your notification button so whenever I upload a video, you get to see, you don't miss a thing. And, we get to talk about the sports that we love, which is bodybuilding, right? So the reason why I'm doing this video, because I want you guys to take a listen to the vice president of the IFBB Federation, Tyler Manion, breaking this down, because sometimes it's good to hear from the horse's mouth. We can go back and forth and argue and stuff like that.
Hi everyone, Tyler Manion here, NPC and IFBB Pro League Vice President, and this will be our recap for the Open Men's Bodybuilding at FIbo, brought to you by Superpower. So obviously everybody's seen that Sasan won the prejudging portion of the judging and Andrew won the finals portion. However, it was split in the morning, 4-5 for Sasan, and then Andrew won 3-6 at night, which ended up with Andrew taking the show. For prejudging, basically what the issue was is Andrew showed up with just too much water, and he was just in not good enough condition overall, combined with the water. That, in my opinion, Sasan's conditioning was very good, and basically Andrew's was bad enough that it sacrificed his lines and separation in basically all poses, including the front poses. And if Andrew would have showed up the exact same to the finals, I think the score probably would have been the same. It would have been Sasan that ended up winning the show. However, for the finals, Andrew showed up much different. I would say much improved. Conditioning still not amazing, but the conditioning was much, much better than what he displayed in the morning. Obviously, the lines and the separation, especially in his front poses and even in his abs, his midsection was much deeper than it was in the morning. And when you combine that with his overall size, shape, structure, and flow, it was very overwhelming when he was standing next to the rest of these guys, including Sasan. Really, the size difference was very, very evident when they were standing next to each other. But still, Sasan was able to take some poses from Andrew during the final, so I will break it down pose by pose just so you guys can see what I was looking at and saw from the judges table. So first is the front double bicep pose. This pose was a very, very clear pose for Andrew. Again, the size difference is massive here in this pose. Also, I would say first, let's look at the arms. There's a big difference in arm size. Sasan's arms, when they're up like this, are on the smaller side. Andrew obviously has bigger arms. Then we go into the taper, into the waist. Sasan, one of his weaknesses is his width and obviously his V-taper. That is one of Andrew's strengths. So you go into that. And then from the front, obviously, Andrew's quads had separation. He actually showed a little bit of feathering and a little bit of striation to his quads from the front during the finals. So head to toe, overall balance and flow. Again, size playing a big factor. And obviously, Andrew's very aesthetic as well. This was a very, very dominant pose for Andrew. Next pose will be the front lat spread. Here, it's basically more of the same, what we saw in the front double bicep. The size difference, again, very, very evident here. Andrew has a lot more width, a lot more thickness through the arms, the shoulders, especially the chest. Then again, the lower body, Andrew's quads from the front, you can see they still have size. And Sasan has great quads from the front, but again, Andrew's overall size, he's kind of dwarfing Sasan in this pose. Sasan's front lat spread is not bad. Obviously, his taper could be a little bit better. His chest could also be a little bit fuller in this pose. And again, the arms and the shoulder thickness just didn't quite compare to Andrew. So a very dominant pose again for Andrew to make it 2-0. Next up was the side chest pose. I felt like this was Sasan's best overall pose. His chest is able to stay thicker in this pose. The way he hits this pose as well, his shoulders look bigger. His outer arms and just his overall arm size looks bigger and better and more proportional with his overall body than it does when his arms are raised. So when you get all this, plus he has a very, very good side leg, very balanced quad to hamstring, very good hamstring drop, and obviously his conditioning was very solid. I do want to say Sasan's conditioning was very good overall, but it was a touch on the flatter side. Now we get to Andrew here in the side chest. Again, you really do see the overall size difference and the overall width difference when you go shoulder to shoulder and you just look at that chest thickness and the upper body wise. However, obviously one of Andrew's weaknesses is the size and the balance to his side leg. He needs more hamstrings. Again, you can see the difference in conditioning between the two. Andrew did have separation in lines here, but they were just not as deep as Sasan. Overall, even in Andrew's upper body, the separation and really just the conditioning could still have been better. This is where Sasan shows off the best. It's one of Andrew's weaker poses. For me, I gave this to Sasan to make it 2-1 Andrew. Next up is the back double bicep pose. Now, this pose was very interesting because when you just look at overall size, structure, and balance, your eyes obviously go towards Andrew. However, I think Andrew's conditioning was the worst when it came to the back poses. You could see lines and separation throughout his front and the side poses. When it got to the back pose, everything just seemed just a little bit too soft. So even though Andrew overall has a much better back double bicep pose than Sasan's conditioning was showing through here. He did do a little bit of a better job than he has recently of opening up his back and his lats a little bit more. But as you can see, he can still use more width in the back. He can still use more depth and thickness to the back as well. And then again, he can still use more size to the arms. But the conditioning difference here really in person was shining through. So for me, I gave Sasan this pose still to make it 2-2. Next up is the back lat spread pose. This was another very strong pose by Sasan. In my opinion, probably his second best pose. He was able to hit it so his width actually looks very good in this pose. His back thickness also looks good in this pose. Again, the lower body, the conditioning is there. The overall completeness and size is there. Andrew does not hit this pose well at all. He rounds forward his shoulders. He's not getting his lats even close to all the way out the way they should be. Again, the lower body, the size is there. When standing next to Sasan, he still needs more hamstrings from the back. But again, the overall conditioning, especially in person from the back, everything was just too soft here for me. So I gave this pose clearly to Sasan to now make it 3 poses to 2 Sasan. Next up is the side tricep pose. Again, like you've been hearing me saying, overall size and roundness and thickness really came into play here. Sasan's chest, the way he hits this pose, it really flattens out. Again, his overall arm size is okay. It could still be, a good bit bigger. Side leg is obviously good. His core and his abs are good. Now you get to Andrew, and Andrew's arms and shoulders are much bigger than Sasan's. It has a great balance because his chest, as you can see, is super, super thick here. His width from shoulder to shoulder is obviously much better as well. Again, the side leg, Andrew's side leg in size does compare to Sasan's. He does need more balance with the hamstrings. The conditioning could be a little bit deeper, but when you look at that, the whole entire pose here and still the overall flow and everything else, for me, this was a pose that went to Andrew because, again, the size and the thickness and the roundness and the fullness. So now it's 3 poses to 3. The next pose is the abdominal and thigh pose. This is obviously one of Andrew's strongest poses. I think Sasan has a great abdominal and thigh pose as well. But again, you can see he just needs that more width to really accentuate this pose, obviously with the lats coming down into the waist. And his arms could be a little bit bigger as well. Andrew, he has a great abdominal and thigh pose. Quads from the front, probably because the conditioning wasn't quite as the same as the Arnold. The quads from the front were definitely up in size. They're still separated. Whenever he flexed his quad all the way out, you can still see some feathering. And again, the arms flowing into the very, very wide lats down into the very tight waist and conditioned core. For me, even though Sasan's pose is still strong, this was a clear pose for Andrew to make it 4 poses to 3. Then last up would be the most muscular pose. Andrew was hitting a little bit, of his own variation of the hands clasp most muscular like Sasan did, except obviously he's taking a little bit farther and not clasping the hands. Again, here, the overall size and roundness and fullness was really on display. When they're right next to each other, Andrew's just kind of dwarfing Sasan in the most muscular. Obviously, in the most muscular, we're looking at how much muscle you have, combined with all the other factors of bodybuilding. But again, for me, this was a clear pose for Andrew in person, again, because his conditioning was just good enough at night where you can see the muscles were separated and you can see the lines in the separation, obviously the amount of size that he carried. So for me, that made the finals 5 poses to 3 for Andrew. He basically just did enough to reverse course from prejudging and finals. There was a major difference in his looks from both of those. And really, sometimes that's what it comes down to in bodybuilding is some guys can afford to be a little bit more off than others because of the physique that they have built. And of course, obviously, that's not something that, when you're on the losing end of that you would like to hear. But everything comes into play in bodybuilding. It's not just one set of criteria. If it was just based off of conditioning, then obviously Sasan had the better conditioning. If it was just based off, Andrew wins it based off size, and we don't have to look at anything else. But another show where to another guy because he wasn't conditioned enough and the other guy was more conditioned. Well, you can't say A happened, so B must happen, because when two people stand next to each other, it's completely different than two other people. They have their own strengths and weaknesses. So you can't just say, oh, this is always going to happen because this happened in the past between these two guys, when two different guys are on stage bringing two completely different physiques and two completely different looks. So that's why you get on stage in bodybuilding. You never know how you're going to compare to the other person. You don't know how on or how off they're going to be. And really, you go pose by pose and you identify all the criteria of bodybuilding to make your decision. So this definitely wasn't an easy decision. It wasn't an easy show. Sasan made it very difficult on Andrew, who was obviously a top 5 Olympian. And Andrew, by the skin of his teeth, pulled it together for the finals and was able to overcome the deficit that he created for himself in prejudging to win the show. In third place, we had Sergio. For Sergio, I think the main things that he needs to work on are his overall back, needs more thickness to the overall back, definitely needs more width as well to the lower lats. So the upper back can still improve, but definitely the lower back and lower lats need to be filled in more. His chest was a little bit on the flatter side, so some more thickness to the chest. And then I would say make sure keeping the waistline under control. I think he can bring the waistline in just a little bit more. And I felt like his legs looked very solid overall, but he could still use just a little bit more of that leg width all the way around, front, side, and back just a little bit more. But for him, I felt like he got a lot better too from prejudging to finals. Again, he has good overall shape, solid arms. He presented himself very well. And I felt like it was a very good showing back after being off stage for a couple of years. In fourth, we had Justin. Justin brought very, very good conditioning to the stage. I think he did a pretty decent job of controlling his stomach on stage. However, he was doing a very good job of pulling vacuums, but whenever he was breathing and trying to get out of the vacuum or having to relax a little bit, he was definitely having trouble keeping his stomach flat instead of letting it go out a little bit as he was transitioning throughout the poses. For him, the main things he needs to work on is he needs more width to his physique. He needs more V-taper. He can also use a little bit more thickness to the upper chest. He can also use more development to the quads, meaning bigger quads and more leg width to the quads from the front. Finally, his back double bicep is definitely solid, but again, he can turn that into much more of a strength with a little bit more of that depth and thickness back there. But for him, this is not the first time I judged him. I feel like he definitely improved from last year, and his conditioning was probably the best overall conditioning on the stage. And I felt like from what I saw from how he looked in Detroit, he made big improvements in only a couple weeks' time in how he presented himself and just how his overall physique looked and flowed at this show.